Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things Eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, and this is episode 42 of the podcast. Can't believe we've made it that far. And we are going to be doing an actual constructed breakdown today. Going to be breaking down the ECQ that just went down this past weekend, which is actually the first one of the new season on your journey to World. So once again, I do mention this is a limited focus podcast, but we do veer off from time to time, and so this is going to be one of those. But rest assured, you're not just going to hear me talk to myself. We have a special guest with us today that is a constructed as well as limited player. He's been streaming for a year now and has a top 4 finish on the Tuesday night Eternal tournament to his name. Fantastic guy, really great streamer. I enjoy his stream, super low key. Also one of the content creators on the Content Creator Showdown. You can catch him competing against the best of the best in the entertainment world. We have Mattyocre. What is up, buddy?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. It just ended up working out really good. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, and I know you don't quite consider yourself a limited aficionado just yet, but I do know you have definite play skill. So it kind of worked out where I was able to, you know, all the buzz is in the ECQs now, and the first one was Expedition, which is a brand new format, and so I thought it was great to have you on the show. So I really do appreciate you making the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an accomplished limited player yet, but I'm trying to get there.
I won't lie. I've been having my fair share of struggle in this format as well. In the last couple of formats, I was able to average some pretty decent 6-3s and 7-2s and stuff like that. But this one, I'm very much in like the 4-3 range of consistently. So it is what it is. I actually just streamed earlier tonight and ended up going 2-3 on both my drafts. The second one I kind of expected, but the first one was actually a pretty good deck. And sure enough, we drafted a bomb legendary, and I was like, I guarantee we won't see it. And we saw it once. Right when our opponent milled it. So it went straight to our void, and I was like, yep, awesome. So
just one of those days.
Yeah, it's all right. I actually appreciate those kind of streams because I feel like it lets people know that we're still just players like them, you know.
Yep.
I guess it's a little different. Actually, not even, because even LSV occasionally for Channel Fireball, he does magic content for those of you that don't know, and one of the lead developers for Eternal. He posts videos, both constructed and draft videos, where sometimes he just goes 0-3. He's like, yep, well, there you have it. So it's one of the things I try to do on my channel as well, which actually, why don't we go ahead and plug that while we're talking about YouTube? You have a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. I've got a YouTube channel. I put up a lot of stream highlights and some straight to YouTube videos as well. And I'm kind of trying to get some new series together for my YouTube channel. So trying to flesh that part out. But yeah.
Oh, sweet. That's exciting. Can you give us a snippet on what the series is, or is it under development right now?
Still trying to develop it at the moment. Like I have a pretty good idea, but I want to nail everything down first before I do the big reveal. So
yeah, sure. No worries. Great. So definitely keep a lookout on Mattyocre's channel. We'll put the plug in the show notes as well as the end of the podcast as well for you guys to stay tuned and tune into that. That being said, let's do a little bit of quick housekeeping. Check out our YouTube channel, EJthePodcast, or Eternal Journey on YouTube. Do the search and you will come out there where we have all kinds of tournament reports. We have draft videos, draft sealed, once again constructed. Don't have a lot of time to make a lot of constructed content, but once again, my first 10 games of this ECQ I will be cleaning up and posting on there as well, so be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, you can catch the video version of this podcast, so if you are a more visual person, you can definitely check it out there. And, of course, next up is the Cube Draft. We do a weekly Cube Draft where multiple formats, completely free to join. You're more than welcome to spectate as well if it sounds a little intimidating. If you are not quite sure what a cube draft is, definitely tune into the last podcast, episode 41, where I do a little more in depth in it. So I don't want to take up too much time here because I actually have no idea how long this show is going to take. But I do want to give a shout out to Stever Cakes from Eternal Warcry and Cassendrath, a fellow limited streamer, for putting together the draft simulator. That's right. So now instead of me making a ton of JPEGs and we all draft the same packs, I can plug in the cube to Eternal Warcry and we all draft our own individual cards and packs, which is absolutely phenomenal. So definitely shout out to them for making that happen. Once again, cube drafting every Sunday on my stream, 10:30 to 11:30 roughly start time, or 10:30 to 11 start time Central Time. And lastly, subscribers shout out. Of course, one of the big ways that you can support content creators is by kind of putting your money where your mouth is, and supporting us on Twitch is mainly the only form of income I have right now for the moment. It might be a while before I change that. And so I really do appreciate those of you that have found I am worthy enough of your monthly subscriptions. I really appreciate that. So I like to first off say thank you to all the reoccurring resubs. Thank you guys so much for maintaining the Jedi Order's growth and recruitment and just overall support. I really do appreciate that. It means a lot to me. It definitely makes it a little bit easier to justify taking so much time out of my day or week sometimes to make this stuff for you guys, but I really do appreciate it. A couple of new recruits I'd like to give shout outs to: Extinction, Evil Evolution, Leet Kaiser, and Commander Elfin. Thank you guys so much for joining the Jedi Order. Shout out to you guys. And then of course Toke Wrath, which is a return subber, but definitely hooked it up with the bits this week. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Then of course a shout out to all the many streamers. I got a ton of raids this week, so kind of don't want to take up too much of the show. A lot of them are all repeats. I don't think I have any new raiders today. So thank you guys to all the usual suspects that raid me. I really, really do appreciate it. I can't thank you guys enough. And of course, everyone that's tuning in this podcast. I think the community from Eternal is one of the best around when the gaming wise, and everyone supports everyone else. So I definitely encourage you guys, if you aren't following other streamers and content creators, please do, because you never know who you are going to fall in love with the entertainment side of it. But yeah, that's about it. Mattyocre, do you have any shout outs you want to give here while we're here?
No, I don't think I have anything actually.
Yeah, sweet. No worries. I know I kind of just dropped it, but I was like, well, I don't want to be rude. Let me include you real quick.
No, you're good.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So that leads us to our pack one, pick one, which is something that I'm assuming you're familiar with, or do you want me to go ahead and break it down?
No, yeah, I'm definitely familiar.
All right, sweet. So let me go ahead and crack open our pack here. And since they've heard my voice plenty of times, I'm going to go ahead and just go through the pack, and you pretty much give me your feedback for it. For those who don't know, we crack open a pack in game of the latest draft set as if we were doing a draft, and then we evaluate the cards to figure out what our pack one, pick one is, like the first card for our draft. So, of course, I've got the pack here up in front of me, so I'll go ahead and run through some of the cards, Mattyocre, and you just kind of give me your feedback on it, and we'll figure out what you're going to take pack one, pick one. So first up, we have Cinder Dragon, 4/4 flying Nightmare Dragon at common for 6, and Stone Scar, so Fire Shadow. Where are you at on this guy?
It's a pretty good card. I mean, you always want to have top end flyers. A little understated for a flyer. It costs 6, but it's serviceable. But obviously, you probably for 6 want something that's going to be a little more impactful. So I'm not super high on the card, but it's definitely something you could take if you're in the colors and you're looking for a good top end.
Yeah, it's a little tough looking at it first pick, just because it's 2 colors and it's a 6 drop. Both things that are very restricting sometimes, because you only have a limited number of slots. So
yeah, for sure.
Next up, we have Nahid's Faithful, which is seeing a ton of constructed play right now, and it's not too bad in limited. We have a 2/1 cultist at common for 1 time shadow. It has lifesteal, and then summon, you may sacrifice another unit to give Nahid's Faithful +2/+2. All right, what do you think?
I mean, this card's obviously very, very good. I think it's better in constructed, but there's a ton of situations where it works really well in limited as well. I mean, we got the Wisp that draws a card when it dies. There's a lot of sacrifice value in this format, so it's definitely really strong. I'm not sure about first picking it. I'd have to see the rest of the pack first, but definitely something that I would be fine picking first.
Got you. Yeah. And moving on, we've got Breath of Voprek. So this card's just bad, right?
Yeah, it is very bad.
Okay, cool. Just making sure, just in case you had something to add to it, we'll move on. We have Banewolf. This is the 7/6 Dire Beast at common for 7 in a shadow. It has mastery 7, so if it hits once, it becomes unblockable.
Yeah, this one's a pretty legit bomb. If you can get the mastery off, it's unblockable. Obviously, very difficult to deal with at that point. You can't just chump it infinitely and try to, find a way to answer it. So, if you're able to get the mastery off, it's very strong. Obviously, just a vanilla 7/6 for 7. If you're not able to mastery, is not, insane. But I mean, it's fine at the top end. So, uh, yeah, definitely would have to see the rest of the pack, but it would definitely be fine as a first pick, I think.
Yeah, it just, that trouble thing where it's just a very interchangeable card, very replaceable.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, easily splashable. 1 color and 7 means you got time to get there.
Absolutely.
Ardent Convert is our next one. 1/1 cultist at common for 1 at a time, and then it just says exalted. I personally have gone down a little bit on all these 1/1 exalted. Initially, I had them at like a C plus. I think now after playing with them, really the exalted is nice if you can add to it, but just the 1/1 vanilla, even with lifesteal or quick draw, I'm kind of lower on them, probably closer to like a C minus now. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lifesteal one is obviously the strongest, but they're definitely much better if you can put something like killer on it and then just keep moving killer around. That's when it becomes really strong. But yeah, just by itself, not really very good, and certainly not a good first pick.
Okay, here's another spicy one. We have Warhorn. This is the +2/+2 weapon at common for 4 and a fire. It says when the wielder hits the enemy player, create and draw a 2/2 Oni Grunt.
Yeah, I'm very high on this card. Super strong. I would consider it as a first pick. It's like if you can put it on a flyer or anything evasive, you're going to be getting a stream of 2/2s, and that's never a bad thing. And you can just use those to go wide. You can use them to chump. It's very good, and yeah, definitely something I would pick first.
Yeah, I actually got to live the dream. I don't remember if it was sealed or draft or whatnot. I think it was draft, but I managed to put this on a flyer, and I had a war. Yeah, I think it had to be draft because I had a war painter and an ardent
Yes.
or living example. So every time I hit, I was making a 4/3 for 2. Oh, it was so good.
Oh man, that's amazing. I love the synergies like that.
Yeah, it's so good. That's the one thing I do like about Eternal, how the draw mechanics work, like all the things that equal into a draw, so like they overlap. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All right, moving right along, we have Longtail Cavalry. This is a 2/1 Unseen Kieran at common for 5, Justice. It has flying and exalted. How about this exalted card?
I actually like this one a lot. It seems pretty bad just by the stats. I mean, obviously 2/1 flying for 5 is not ideal, but the exalted makes it a lot better because it forces the opponent into a really awkward situation where, like, yeah, they want to get this flyer off the board, but then they're creating another probably much bigger flyer in the process. So it's a really hard card for opponents to play around, and I've had some pretty good success with it. So I'm definitely pretty high on this card. I'm not sure I'd first pick it though.
Yeah, I like it too. A good example of, for me, like a good way to evaluate cards is how I feel about it when it's on my opponent's side of the board. And whenever they play, it's exactly what you said, where like all of a sudden it's like, well, I can kill it, but then I just make a way bigger flyer, and I don't know if I want that, so can I just take 2? And then sometimes when people leave it on defense, you're like, well, I can't really attack because then, I'm giving them a good attack on the crackback. So yeah, I agree. I like Longtail Cavalry quite a bit. I started off high on it, and then I went down a little bit on it, and then I came back up on it. Like,
Yeah.
I think I was just like building my deck slightly incorrectly. I don't know, because there were sometimes where you play. I mean, still playing a 2/1 on 5 is a little underwhelming, but the evasion on that exalted is really where it makes its money.
Yeah, I think in situations where you have nothing else on the board, then it feels really awful because it is exactly just a 2/1 flyer for 5, and that feels really bad. But pretty much any other situation where you have even a decent target, it feels really good.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, and the last of our commons is Cult Recruiter. This is the 3/3 cultist at common for 4 time. Has ambush and then mastery 4 +1/+1.
Yeah, I like this card quite a bit. I mean, anything with ambush that has decent stats is usually pretty solid. I mean, you're able to surprise your opponent with a block they weren't expecting. And this one having mastery to potentially make it bigger is just a nice little bonus. So it's not gonna blow you out of the water, but it's definitely a solid card.
Yeah, so I think we're still very much on Warhorn here.
Yeah, so far for sure.
Okay, moving on to our uncommons, we have Forge Mark Scrivener. Scrivener? I don't know. I always say Scrivener, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's Scrivener. Yeah.
Okay, this is the 2/3 Oni at uncommon for 3 and a Justice. It has Mastery 2. Play a +1/+2 weapon on one of your other Oni. And then Mastery 6. Play a +1/+2 weapon on each of your Oni. I have had very minimal exposure to this guy. I think I've played it in one of my decks, and I think it's played against me maybe twice, honestly. And I think only shoot, I'll be honest with you, I don't even think I've seen it do the. I probably did the Mastery 6, but with only like one Oni in play or something like that, because I don't remember it being a blowout.
Yeah, that's I've had similar experience in terms of not really playing it all that much. I think I've drafted it a lot of times and then just cut it out of every deck that I've had it in, because I think you need to have a pretty good critical mass of Oni to really make it worth it, since it only applies the weapons to Oni. So I think in general it's not really that great, unless, I mean, yeah, you can mastery, I think it's 6 is the top one, and it gives a weapon to itself. Like, I guess that's fine, but unless you have 3 or 4 other Oni out there, it's really not that good. Even just having 1 or 2 out there is not really very strong in general. Like, you want that hitting a bunch of stuff to really make it worth it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the biggest downfall to this guy, is that typically most of the time you're going to hit that Mastery 2 and just not do anything.
Yeah, exactly. The only way I could see this being really good is if you have like 2 or 3 Warhorns and a couple other Oni, and then you're just, making a bunch of Oni with the Warhorn. You get them all out on the battlefield, and then you get the mastery off on this guy, and they're all huge. That's like the dream scenario, but I doubt that happens very often in Limited.
Yeah, true story. Magic Christmas Land is called that for a reason.
That's right.
So next up on the uncommons, we have Edict of Makar. This is the shadow one. So 1 and a shadow, you get a slow spell that says an enemy unit of your choice can't block this turn. If it's time or justice, so public enemy number 1 there in the form of Combre, you can kill that unit instead. Where are you at on the edicts? And then you could say this one in particular.
I really like the edicts in general as market cards, and as especially in Expedition, I think they're really strong in the market. I don't really see it as a great main deck card, but in Limited, anything that can kill even conditionally is usually pretty solid, because limited formats usually don't have all that much removal, or at least consistent removal. So I think in general it's fine, but I don't think it's something that you would want to pick first.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I can get behind that. And for me, I kind of value like what they do without. It's weird because this one, the unit can't block, isn't very exciting for me. I typically don't like that, but the fact that it does target the 2 most powerful colors in the format kind of makes me a little more inclined to take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point, anything that kills time is solid for me, because there's so many like big time units that are just, oh god, please don't have it,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's some value there, but I do agree with you. This one, the fact that, just that kind of falter effect, if I can coin a term from Magic, just doesn't really quite work that much. But like I said, I've come up a little bit on them just because if it hits time, or if it hits, fire isn't bad because you can obviously hit the dragons, but yeah, anything that says justice or time on, I'm a little higher on. But moving on, our last uncommon is Green Stretch Empath. This is a 3/5 druid for 5 and a primal, and it says muster, draw 2 cards, which for all intents and purposes is the best muster card.
Yeah, I would agree with that, except for maybe Saudi, because she's just kind of insane. But it's I feel like muster is just way too hard to pull off in Limited. That's just what I've always found. Like, I really wanted it to work. Like, I've tried it in several different decks in draft, and it's so hard to actually pull off muster consistently, turn after turn, to really get the full value. Like, I mean, drawing 2 is great, but the chances that you're going to muster in Limited are pretty low unless you have a lot of, one drops of both spells and attachments, or a lot of spellcraft.
Yeah, what I've seen is what makes it difficult is the underrepresentation of it, which Kalibovich went in depth about it. If you guys want to check that out. But the other problem is the fact that the deck is in two entirely separate packs. You get all your muster cards from packs 1 and 4, and then all your muster enablers in packs 2 and 3. And packs 2 and 3 are so randomized that it's like, there was one time in particular where I ended up picking 3 green stretch empaths in pack 1. It was like a pick 2, a pick 4, and then like a pick 7 or something.
Oh, wow.
And then I ended up literally, I kid you not, getting 1 spellcraft weapon in packs 2 and 3.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where, like, man, like when the deck happens, it happens. I've occasionally come across someone with the deck and it just goes nuts, especially if they have traditionalist and they could stack them to where all of a sudden these guys are like 8/8 with trample or overwhelm and stuff. Then the deck just seems absolutely busted. Or if they continuously trigger the empath and they're just drawing a million cards. But man, you really have to be careful on whether it comes together or not.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult to pull that one together for sure, because you have to have the combo of, already having played the empath and then also having either a spellcraft weapon or, combination of the spell and attachment. So it's not easy to pull off, even for one turn, let alone multiples.
Yeah, and in my experiences, the only real ways to get muster off without the spellcraft weapons is having stuff like Seek Power or the killer effects. Mm-hmm. Those are about the only 2 things. Every other spell, there's always going to be awkward times where you either cost too much or you don't have, like, the window that you want to play it is not the window you have, like the equipment or the weapon. It's so awkward to play on 2 different spells, like so awkward. Really unless you have like that cheap 1 power spell to like sneak in there that is kind of irrelevant to the board,
Yeah, like an Inflict Conscience and a Seek Power or something like that. Like
exactly. Yep.
Would work very well, but the chances you have that are just so low,
Yeah. Oh, of course. And it's, even then, Inflict Conscience is a great example because you'll keep it in your hand. You're like, all right, well, I'll hold it till I get a spell so I can trigger muster. But then they drop something that is a threat. It's like, okay, well, do I play this or do I hold it? Like, how many hits can I take? And it's super awkward. And then, like, you have to weigh, okay, is holding this card for 3 turns worth the value I'm going to get out of it whenever I am going to muster? And sometimes it's not. It's very awkward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you really have to evaluate muster cards, specifically in limited, on just whatever they have aside from muster, because you can't really rely on muster happening often enough for that to be a thing. So,
all right. And so we're still on Warhorn, right? Is that still your pick?
So far, yeah.
All right, we do have a rare, obviously. It is Electrostatic Distortion, which has been played against me exactly 1 time. It is a cursed relic for 1 and Huru, so just this time. The cursed player can't have more than 1 armor, and their spells each deal -1 damage. I think in the last format, this card might have seen a little more play, considering that the Argenport thing was like armor matters. But in this format, like, there's barely any relic weapons. And I mean, I guess it's like a counter to the new Wizened Crone deck, but not really. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, this one's just cute. Like, it's one of those rares that's like, why is this even a card, let alone a rare,
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like Armory is a thing in Constructed either, so right. I have no idea. I guess they just...
Well, even if it was, this isn't really that good against it. I mean, limiting the armor is fine, I guess, but you would rather just, be killing the weapons than putting them down to 1 armor. So, I don't know. It seems... It doesn't seem very good to me.
Yeah, it's one of those skill checks ones, Like, how good are you at evaluating cards?
Right, it could actually be very good, and I'm just missing the boat.
All right, sweet. Well, so Warhorn is going to be our pack 1 pick 1 this time. Not bad. I'm happy with that. Easily splashable, goes in a lot of decks. It works with evasion. I like it.
Absolutely.
Sweet. All right, that is going to do it. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into our main topic, which is our ECQ breakdown or runs this past weekend. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk about our decks. So real quick for me, just to start the dialogue, for me, the deck I'm having the most fun in Expedition with is Onis, Rakana Onis. I dabbled a little. Actually, yeah, that's just plain and simple. I did play around a little bit with the Time Justice Primal Control deck, just because I don't hate temporal control in Constructed or in Throne. So I wanted to try something like that. I was doing like a lot of echo value, using Twin Brood and Thunderstrike Dragon, which is not unheard of. I've seen other decks doing it, and Shinra Speaks. It did okay, but it wasn't impressive enough. But so it's pretty much exclusive for Rakana Onis, kind of slowly modifying it, and I liked it, and it got me up to Masters. But at the end, when I started to keep track of my records for the ECQ prepping, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was consistent enough. I wasn't high enough in the 50% range to feel good against the board. So I started trying out different decks, seeing what other people. I tried out the Huru deck. With a slightly different build, a little more aggressive, a little less mid-rangey or control-y. And I was climbing with it, but then I would occasionally go through losing streaks. It just made me frustrated. I did finally jump on the Elysian bandwagon at that point. I did not craft the Nashes. I had one, so I played that and then modified it with like the sprite, the looting sprite, the 1/4 that I've seen some builds do. And that was okay. I didn't feel great about it. I don't know. Tempo decks are a little weird for me. I like when they work out great, they work out great. But I think it's so easily to disrupt it sometimes that I don't like that kind of consistently. And then finally, I settled on Stone Scar and played a lot of Stone Scar, using some of the Stone Scar decks from like Stone Scar Dragons and Mono Shadow from Cassendrath, and the Dragon deck from Papa Capricorn that took down the one of the Tuesday Night Eternals, and I was doing fairly good with that deck again. But then sure enough, when I thought I was doing good, all of a sudden I just get into multiple losing streaks and look at my record, and I try not to be a feel kind of guy and look at the actual numbers, and it just wasn't there as well. So finally I just ended up biting the bullet and picked up Sunnyvale's list for Cultist, Zenith Cultist, jumping on the bandwagon and being part of Public Enemy #1, and modifying it a little bit, making it a little less aggressive and making room for 4 Incarnus to give it a little bit of late game action. And that's why I settled with. So that's my journey kind of leading up to what deck to choose. I tried my darndest not to play it because I very much am that kind of guy. I've always been. I don't think I do it on purpose, but I prefer to not play the #1 deck if I can help it, just because I don't want to be playing a bunch of mirrors. And then, of course, a lot of people are gunning for it, so they may have more experience against the matchup than not. So I try not to play the #1 deck unless it's just point blank clearly the best in the deck. But that was my take on it. How about you?
Well, I'm glad that you said that, first of all, because I'm exactly the same way. I am one that kind of tries to avoid playing the very best deck. I like to try to find something that can beat that deck and also do well against the field. I guess I probably don't always do a very good job of it, but that's kind of where I come from as well. But I've been playing a bunch of different decks in Expedition. Some of my favorites are like the Burn deck, Skycrack Burn.
I have not tried that deck yet, but it seems like so much fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. I had so much fun with that deck, and I definitely recommend you try it out. But I definitely had a few consistency issues with it, and it does not deal super well with time decks, and those are pretty prevalent. So that's definitely got its issues, but it's a ton of fun to play. That was one I was playing a lot, and I was considering that one. But yeah, obviously having issues against time decks and Xena being so prominent, it seemed like a bad choice. And I think that's a really tough matchup as well because it just goes so wide. But
yeah, like you don't want to stack the deck against you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
especially it's one thing if you're there to have fun and you just want to play, but it's entirely another thing when you actually want a legitimate shot at winning. It's like, okay, you really have to make that decision finally. Like, how much fun do I want to have, or and so it's like you said, and you made a very good point. Like, there's that fine line where you don't want, I'm not a person, I'm like I say, I want to take my home brew. You know, I'm not that person that goes in there and be like, hey, I got 2 wins, so like I'm awesome, my deck's great. No, I want to do well. So if
I'm the same way, and I like for one thing, I don't think I'm a very good deck brewer. Like I try my best, but a lot of my creations kind of go up in flames usually. But that's always kind of been one of the most difficult parts for me. First off, like trying to build my own deck, and also picking a deck for an event, and that's I just like. I don't know. I've never been one that understood the whole stigma around net decking. Like I get people wanting to, you know, play their own brews, but I'm kind of with you. Like I want to have a chance at winning, but I also, you know, want to kind of play with my own flavor. So play whatever feels best to me. So I've also been playing a ton of Stone Scar Mastery, both like the aggressive version, more mid-rangey versions, and I ended up landing on Papa Capricorn's list that he took down the Tuesday tournament with, and that's what I played in the ECQ. And unfortunately, did not have the most success. I had a lot of pretty bad luck and a lot of high rolls for opponents, which, you know, typical excuses, but ended up 13 and 15. So it was a bit unfortunate of a run, but it happens.
Don't feel bad. I actually forgot my record. I actually didn't, because I normally tallied it together up on my spreadsheet, and I did this time. But I think I was very close to that. I think I finished what was it? It was 28 matches. Yeah. What was the cutoff for getting 40 packs? It was 15.
I think so.
Yeah, so I think I went 15 and 13 with my Xenon list, which is kind of funny because once I picked that, so here's the thing. I actually do value. I think there's more value in knowing your deck and knowing the matchups than people give credit for. 100%, especially when we see these pros that are very competitive, and you see them like, yeah, I just made the decision on the deck this morning or the deck before or the night before. They can do that, but I really do experience, especially in my own personal experience, but I've seen that when watching other tournaments, where if people know a deck and an archetype and they're like, this is what I'm comfortable with, you get so many more extra percentage points at saving mental energy, because you don't have to rethink every single play, because you have heuristics of like, I've seen this 80 times before, this is how I should play it out. But also knowing the interaction, knowing what to expect, knowing what your deck is capable of, goes a long way towards winning games that you might have not won if you only picked the deck up, you know, a couple days sooner. So I really try my best not to like swap decks in the last minute. And plus, once again, enjoy a deck I like. So that's why I tried 3 different versions of Stone Scar as well as Oni, Rakano Oni, to try to get, because those are the 2 decks I would have preferred to play. But I just had to be honest with myself. And even though I did win some Cultist matchups and some Elysian decks, like it just wasn't as consistent as I want it to be. And so that's why I settled on it. So I do think there is something to be said there about just taking a deck and jamming a preposterous amount of games with it. So you are going to win more than maybe you should potentially, if they, you know, and once again, same thing for a tournament like this where everyone's moving around decks. You might have a bad Xenon matchup, but if you come across people like me that have only been playing Xenon for a day, then there's a good chance you'll be able to wreck it regardless of the deck matchup.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Being comfortable with the deck that you're playing is so huge for any tournament, because, you know, like you said, if you know the plays, like, I've seen this 100 times, I know exactly what to do, that goes such a long way. And if you're, you know, if it's a new deck and you're in a situation where you've never seen that before and you're not really sure what the right play is, that's not a good feeling when you're in a tournament situation where you're really trying to win.
Yep. And so I went into the tournament with a very loose demeanor. I was not expecting to go deep into it, just the realism of it. You know, I did not have enough experience with this deck, et cetera, et cetera. It's the first big tournament of the season, so, you know, everyone and their grandmothers is going to show up. And I ended up starting off 5-1. I think I went 3-1 and then 2. So I was like, wow, all right, maybe I do have a shot at this. Needless to say, though, that the record quickly deteriorated. One caveat I do want to throw out here, and you could throw your own snippet too before we get down to the actual breakdown of it, is that take advantage of the fact that this tournament being online, or this type of organized play gives you the ability to spread out your games, avoid tilt, avoid mental exhaustion, take breaks, reset, do something else. Take advantage of all those little things that you're afforded to do here because you can do it. Versus, when you're playing in real life paper, time is of the issue. People traveled, people have jobs, et cetera, tournament organizers. And so you have to sit there and jam out 8 to 12 rounds in one day. This is just mentally and physically exhausting. So take advantage of the fact that if you're playing online, you're able to take your time. Like, now, granted, I'm not saying take the entire window from game 1 all the way to game 28, from when the queue times close. But if you come into a streak or you catch yourself losing, or maybe you had a real brain fryer kind of game, take a little bit of a break, reset, and come back as fresh as you can to give yourself every possible chance of winning. Do you have anything else to add to that, Matty?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that for me, it kind of just makes me think of how we just don't really have enough time, because like 28 games is a lot. It's like you said, like you definitely can get mentally exhausted from that very easily, because that's like hours of gameplay, and we only get 24 hours to play those 28 games, and I feel like if we had maybe even just one extra day for the prelims, that would go such a long way for a lot of people. Because I think probably a lot of people that are maybe a little bit more casual, but kind of considering doing more competitive play, probably are kind of scared off by that. It is a lot of games and it's pretty daunting. And especially when you only have one day to really get those games in, it's definitely a tall task. So I don't know. I feel like if we had one extra day even would go such a long way for, getting more people in, and also just, being able to, like you said, avoid tilt and, kind of reset, give yourself a chance to, like, maybe you start off well, you start losing, you can just, okay, I'm done for the day. I'll come back tomorrow, finish off my games and see how I do. So I just kind of wish that we had more time to get those prelims in, because it's just definitely a lot.
Yeah, and sadly, you have to play 28 games because it's best of one. So
Right.
if they drop the number down, now you have less room for error and less room for variance. And so the round count, despite 28 games feeling like a lot, if it's best of 3, you're talking about probably about 8 rounds, which is still pretty accurate.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, you have to be able to whittle it down in terms of record and distinguish between, the top players, and the more or the less games that you have, the more it comes down to tiebreakers, which no one feels good about. So it definitely it makes sense that we have to play that many. It would be nice to have more time.
I agree. I guess maybe that might be part of it too, is just having that mental fortitude to push through that. It might be part of the aspect. I'm not sure. Maybe
you might be right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Pretty much, I just go down my spreadsheet and go round by round. If there's something that's relevant, I'll bring it up. If not, we could just move right along. Do you have a round by round breakdown, or do you have more generalized notes on this?
Just pretty general.
Okay, all right, cool. So I'll probably just end up going, I guess maybe I'll go through every round, and then you can kind of and you can interject when you want about your deck. So once again, I'm playing Sunnyvale's more or less standard list of Xenon Cultist, just modified for Incarnus, and I thought about it and I kicked myself for not doing it, but played 0 Carvets, which I think was a mistake. And like I said, that was just a design of me picking up the deck very last minute and not really taking the time to tune it to my liking quite a bit. But start off with going up against Corendon Control, and they ramped into Temple, and I got stuck, they got stuck. I'm sorry. My notes should be a little more elaborate, but yeah, they ramped up to Temple, and then they just didn't have much gas after that, and I was able to have a Faithful, Nahid's Faithful plus Killer, which is already the combo, and just reoccur it 3 times to just take out their units and then close out the game. And that's one of the good things about Xenon Cultists is just the recursion of Faithful and just units in general to really tax on control decks and be able to continuously get in there, especially adding Killer to stuff that you could reoccur, and just the value engine. And so that was a win. Oh my spreadsheet didn't wait. Oh no, never mind. Hold on. Sorry, I made it too big. So the win thing. Yep. So that was a win. Moving on next, round 2, I go up against Xenon mid range. So a mirror match. They were stuck on power, and I managed to kill their prophet. So Incarnus got the void weapon, the weapon that goes +1/+1 for every unit in your void, and obviously the cultist deck does a great job of filling up the void, and so I took that one down in short order that way. And then for round 3, I go up against Genève mid-range. They played 2 Verits and a Nash, and we both kind of stalemated each other on the board. They were developing their board, I was developing mine, and I thought I was in a tough spot with double Verit and Nash. They did get I think 1 good attack in, but I managed to outvalue them with gargoyles. I was able to chump block a lot, and they played it was Genève, so they played Eclipse Dragon, I believe, because I said killed their dragons ×3. So I guess somehow they played 3 dragons. I killed them all and just crushed them, though. Yeah, apparently. There's only so much room in the notes. I actually expanded the spreadsheet to add more notes because I knew I was going to do this podcast, so I wanted to take more notes. But either way, that's game 3, so you'll catch it. Like I said, the YouTube video of it will have the first 10 games, so you guys can check it out. But yeah, sometimes the cultist deck is just ridiculous. Like, it really is. Like, some of the games I played, I was like, this is why this deck's the best deck. It's just absolutely preposterous, the things the deck can do. But that was a win. Actually, I went, wow, looking at my spreadsheet, I went 5-1 and went 5 straight wins the first time. So yeah, so let me go through that real quick. But next up, game or round 4 went through Huru aggro, and they dropped the lifesteal on turn 1, and then I double Incarnus them, and they stacked the Griffin weapons. So they dropped double Griffins, and so they put it all on the lifesteal guy, and they had a huge guy, but sadly I had the removal spell for their one dude, and so my Incarnus has got there and just kind of out damaged them. Pretty straightforward. I think if the Hero deck can't kind of stabilize and get the early aggression, they kind of fall behind a little bit. Most people were running the aggro version versus the more controlled version that we saw in the top 8. So typically, if you could stop their onslaught, you can typically stabilize and then come back to take it down. And round... Oh no, my bad. I did go 4-1. Sorry, I was counting one of my other ones. And round 5, I go up against Xena min rage, so the mirror match. And I'm not gonna lie, this is where my experience with the deck bit me in the butt. I punted twice, not getting a merchant with, or not getting Vara with the merchant. So I did have a chance to go to the board, and I was on 7 power, so I had to debate on whether I needed to get something I could play next turn for sure or get Vara. And I decided to make the Sephira bet and get something else. And sure enough, I drew the 8th power, which would have given me more value. And they ended up, and then I totally punted. I remember this game. It was a drug out battle. They had a Vara. We were like trading blows. They started to get really ahead on board. And then I stole their Carvet to keep me alive. It was a pumped Carvet. I don't remember how I got pumped, but it was probably like a pump and then exalted or something like that. And then I took it with hostility, and then I forgot what I did, but somehow I go to pump. I only had two units in play, so I decided to pump the Carvet because it was flying. Well, sure enough, the pump made it have higher than 4 attack, and so it immediately broke the curse, and gave it back to my opponent. So I just tilted and conceded there. So that was my game 5. How'd the beginning of the tournament go for you?
It started off actually pretty well. I think I started off 3-1, and I was 1-1 against Cultists in that stretch. So I was feeling pretty good because I knew I was going to see a lot of Xenon, and then it kind of started going downhill from there. But that situation kind of reminded me of one of my games. I'm not sure how far into it was, but I was playing Stonescar Mastery, so I had a Carvet on board. And I was in a pretty good spot, and I had a weapon in hand, and I think I had something else. I can't remember exactly, but I played the other thing instead of putting the weapon on Carvet, as was one of my other options. And the very next turn, they went to the market and got the hostilities and stole it, and it was just the the most sinking feeling because I had been ahead the entire game, and that ended up being a loss. So that was pretty rough.
Yeah, it's always tough, especially in a tournament environment where you think you not necessarily locked up the win, but you feel like you're advantaged in this point, and just one turn all of a sudden just changes everything around. You're just like, what just happened?
Yeah, there's a lot of swings in this format. I found.
I agree. I feel like that very much so.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along, going into round 6, I go a Stone Scar mid range, and we dropped the Prophet on turn 2 and had all kinds of ways of sacking cultist and ramping, and I believe we ended up dropping like a Vara, like big Vara on turn 6 or 5 or something ridiculous like that. And so
wow.
we were able to outvalue their 2 Kozins. They dropped 2 Kozins, but yeah, it was just one of those things where, like, if I remember, it was Nahid's choice turn 2, so we got 2 cultists. Then we attacked and played our Prophet, then sacked one to the Zol's Rest or whatever, you know what I'm talking about? The Soul,
Oh yeah, the
Son of Zol.
ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah, Soul's Rest.
Yeah, there you go.
Or is it?
No,
Soul's Rest is the extra turn.
No, it's something of Soul.
Something Soul,
whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, the bargain card, yeah. And then, the next turn, play a Faithful to sack the other cultist, and it just steamrolled from there. So, like, sometimes the Prophet just gives you like 5 or 6 power. It's ridiculous. So that one ended up being a win. Next up, we go in up against Combray Aggro, which is essentially was a top tier deck initially with the format. A ton of streamers were playing this deck, and I don't know if like Cultist wasn't a thing yet or what, but it slowly kind of drifted away. I barely see it on ladder these days. It's still there, but it's just not nearly as represented as I once thought. But they steamroll us. They drop ×3 Kira at the start. So like Kira.
Oh man.
Yeah, and then they play the Zoltan 6-drop or 5-drop that when you can shift it, and then when one unit attacks, it's kind of like the Oath Book on a stick. So when one unit attacks, it gets a +1/+1, and then we really didn't draw much gas. It ended up being kind of close. We were able to make some trades and stuff like that, and we're able to continually chump block the Zoltan, but it was just too much value to overcome, and they took us down. Moving along to round 8. Hold on, let me catch so many. I need to space out I need to like color code my spreadsheet or something like that.
Yeah.
Like put the different bars. All right, yeah, no, it was round 8. I was right. All right, round 8, we go up against a mirror match. Big surprise. They ramped into a turn 3. Mirror match ramped into a turn 3. Turn 4, Incarnus. Yes, so they double Incarnused us. Incarnused on. Oh no, we did, and then they were choked on power, and then Wretch Talon. Oh yeah, okay, I remember this game. So we ramped into a turn 3. So Prophet on 2, drop Incarnus on 3, drop another Incarnus on 4. They stumbled on their power a little bit, and then when they were able to stabilize, we got a Wretch Talon off of our Incarnus, and so we were able to onslaught it with our Incarnus to kill their Incarnus, as well as leave a 1/1 deadly spider on the board, and that just kind of helped us take the game down. Round 9, another mirror match. Woohoo! This time they ramped ahead of us, and they landed the temple with nothing on board for us to like really push damage in, and so they just accrued so much value. They double carve it on us, got the World Joiner out, and yeah, they just absolutely wrecked us. Nothing to say there. It was kind of a very one-sided match. Just landing that temple early is just so decimating in the mirror match, because you're not able to fill up your void because the temple makes all the units that go to your void go to theirs, and they're incurring value off of it, drawing cards, giving something killer. So yeah, an early temple is definitely one of the ways to break the mirror for sure. And then finally, round 10 was another mirror, so triple mirror. I had to take a break after that one for sure. And I used my removal too aggressively, sadly, taking out their earlier units, and they were just able to continuously draw gas after that, and we kind of stumbled a little bit. And so even though in the early game we dominated, we used it a little too aggressively, so later on when the real threats started to come down, we were not able to kind of deal with those, and so we lost. And that was the start of a 3-game losing streak. But yeah, so that's when I started to see a lot of mirror representation. And honestly, I feel like a big exchange in the mirror is when to properly use, what's it called now? The offering card, divine? No, not divine. Favorite offering? No. Oh shoot.
Your offer?
No, not eager offer. The worthy cause, right? Is it worthy cause? The removal spell. Oh my god, how am I drawing a blank on this?
Yeah, worthy cause. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Simply because it's a clean answer, both in silence and minus stats, as well as dealing with profits. The player that sticks the profit in the mirror is the one that's going to end up winning, because they just accrue so much additional power that they're able to do all the things. And then obviously things like Wasp and Carvet kind of help deal with certain interactions and stuff like that. I think Carvet is definitely necessary in this decks. Now, whether you need to have like 3 or 4 in the main or have one in the board or in the market, I'm not necessarily sure yet. Like I said, I haven't played enough to know, but I do think there is a need for Carvet to help either stabilize the board or get you back, or just seal the game with the exalted claws of that unit and all the cultists you have.
For me, I think Carvet is good enough to be a 4 of in pretty much any shadow deck that's not just like hard aggro. The card is just absolutely insane. Even if you're not, synergizing around cultists at all, it's so good by itself, it just doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I said, I was playing Capricorn's version of Stone Scar Dragons as well, and I liked just having the Eclipse Dragons, and the Carvet seemed extremely powerful to me. Carvet was just
absolutely
awesome. It was one of the cards I did not hesitate to craft 4 of, because it just seems like so much value, especially off the back of Vara as well as a follow-up, is just so good.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the safest crafts in the set.
What do you have anything else to add about the mid-range of your run? Any interactions or experiences?
Nothing that stands out here. I think I also started to hit the Xenon wall, and I pretty sure I came out after round 10. I was about 4 and 6, so it had definitely started to go downhill, and it was disappointing because I had one really good win against Xenon, and then I think I hit 2 or 3 in the next 5 games and dropped them all. So it was definitely kind of deflating, and I also had to take a break after that.
Yeah, I did notice a difference in players when they were comfortable with their deck and comfortable in the mirror, and when they were not. I definitely saw that, because there were a couple of games where I felt just completely ran over in the mirror, and then there were others where I felt like it was a little more evenly matched. And I think that's where the experience of the deck and the piloting it came into play. Now, you did mention something. Well, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, I think specifically in mirror matches, experience is probably going to be the victor for the most part, unless both players are very, very experienced, and then it's probably down to skill and luck as usual. But I think if it's experience versus less experience in a mirror match, I think experience wins almost every time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a game of variance, so sometimes your draws matter too. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I think knowing when to use your resources, when not to, is definitely going to make the biggest difference in what to play around.
Certainly not automatic, but yeah.
The one interesting thing I think about the Xenon deck, at least, is the fact that there's so many flavors of it that it's not cut and dry. Occasionally you'll see these decks where there is a cookie cutter, this is the best version, with maybe something like 4 to 6 flex slots that you can interchange, but for the most part the majority of the core of the deck is the same. I think Xenon has enough play to it where you can kind of expect a certain handful of cards, but there's enough variance where you don't 100% know for sure what version you're going to get. So that does make it a little bit more interesting, but most of the time, yeah, the gameplay is kind of redundant, which is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the tough thing about, having one deck that is, I guess widely believed to be the best. And I think a lot of people have touted Xenon as the best for a while now. And I think you just get into that where, a lot of people are playing it and you see it a lot. And it just, yeah, it's sorry, I forgot. I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, it's I think when a lot of people are playing that deck and kind of jumping on the bandwagon, you're definitely going to be seeing it a lot. So
yeah, And don't get me wrong, sometimes you do some great things, but it was fun to play. But it's not like that's all I'm playing now, as far as for my own play style. Now, granted, once again, just to touch on that net decking thing you were talking about, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think by all means the information's out there. Why not? Not everyone 100%. Is a deck brewer. And you're not wrong for playing Xenon. Like, if you're playing Xenon, I'm not gonna be like, oh god, why are you playing Xenon? Like, by all means, play what you have, what you like, for whatever reason. That's okay. So moving right on, I had something to add to that, but I forgot it as well. So I guess we're both on. Oh yeah, the wall thing. So you did mention hitting the Xenon wall. Do you know by chance, just because it crossed my mind, if matches are paired off of any kind of win percentage, or are they completely random?
I think it's random, and it maybe just the normal matchmaking rating factors in like it does in ranked queues, but I don't think it's like if you're 6 and 6, I don't think it's trying to look for another 6 and 6. I think it just looks for somebody who is ready to play.
Okay, it didn't dawn on me till you said that, and then I was wondering, like, since we both fired off like early wins, if like earlier it was like, hey, you just pair off with other people who've only played 2 or 3 games, and then once we started to win, it was like, okay, now you guys get paired against people with better records.
Yeah, maybe that is the case. I don't know. Maybe the matchmaking is different in the tournament setting. Obviously I don't really know a whole lot about all the behind the scenes of that. But yeah, it's definitely possible that the tournament matchmaking is a little different, or it could just be coincidence, and or there's just so many Xenon decks in the tournament that we just happen to see a lot at the same time.
100%. If you know the answer or have any feedback on that, definitely let us know in the comments below, or on Twitter, or on our streams live, which we'll plug at the end of the show. Okay, moving on. Round 11, I go up against Firetime Shadow, and it was a sacrifice synergy deck with Spider Spawning and Lumen Reclaimer to recycle it, and then Waystone Relic. And this deck was really interesting, and believe it or not, I lost to it. I don't remember exactly how I lost to it. I just do remember that I think I was trading off stuff aggressively, playing off me being the attrition deck. And then they just kind of blew me out of the water with like double Spider Spawning. They like Spider Spawned for like 3 or 4. And I kind of played through it. Remember, I'm not running Carvet, so I have minimal ways to get through evasive wise. And so I cleared things up, and then they like Spider Spawning again for 5 or 6 or something. And finally, if I was trying to get through that or something like that, then they Lumen Reclaimer. I'm trying to remember if they Lumen Reclaimer me to get rid of my void, or if they Lumen Reclaimer themselves to reset like all the shenanigans. I'm almost positive they reclaimed me, and so I had no gas in my void, and that was all she wrote. So I lost that one. Next up was Firetime Justice, and I'll be honest with you, this one was a win. The deck just didn't perform. They didn't really do anything at all. I just ran over them. Next up, around 13, go up against Stone Scar Midrange. It was the dragon version, not the aggro. I got stuck on 3 power, and so I lost just because of the incurred value. I think if I remember correctly, that was the frustrating one too, because I had 2 double Incarnates in my hand, and I was stuck on 3 power, just sitting there like, all right, cool.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you have the power, not the influence.
I actually, surprisingly enough, the deck is pretty good about getting triple shadow. I do remember at least one occasion where I was missing the triple shadow, but it didn't happen often enough for me to be like, what's wrong with the influence in this deck,
Yeah, that's good.
So, because I do make a note of that. I'm super critical about things like that. Especially when we just came off of a format where you're running Sadidi, where it's just 5 justice. You really start to pay attention of like, or well, even in Throne right now, these Grodolf decks that are running Heart of the Vault, Kairos, and Ikaria.
Yep. Yeah, it's easy. It's not even really that difficult to put together triple either.
Yeah, super greedy and it works. Yeah. So
there's definitely a lot less fixing in Expedition though, so you even have to pay more attention to it there.
Yep. Next up, another Stone Scar Dragon deck, which probably could have been the popularity off of Papa Capricorn's deck and seen success. They double carve at me, which sure enough was enough to seal the deal. I believe I dealt with the first one, and the second one just couldn't, just overwhelmed me. Moving along, round 15, we have Winchest, which was fun to see. It was an armory style with Brel, which was exciting because that was the deck I was trying to brew. That was my little brew for Expedition when I saw the 3/4 that gave you armor and pumped up your weapons. I was like, oh yeah, I want to build around this guy and or this girl. And sadly, never solidified anything. I know Nover tried the armory thing as well, a little more toolboxy with four Dragon Forges and a bunch of one-ofs. So I was super excited to see it, but sadly I was able to beat it as well. So took that one down. And that was my 1 through 15. I wish I wrote down my record, but right now it's starting to creep up to a little less winning record, a little more even record, sadly. How about you?
Yeah, I'm firmly in the kind of, I guess that feeling where you're trying to climb out of a pit of quicksand. It's you take one step forward and you go 2 steps back, and that's how it felt for me in the middle portion of the event. I felt like I'd get 1 or 2 wins and like, okay, those felt good. I feel maybe I can get some momentum going, get a few more wins, and then lose 2 or 3 in a row, and then I'm right back to square one. And I just kind of fluttered around even to losing record pretty much the whole rest of the way, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when you get to that. And the funny thing is that like that's one of the things that gets me frustrated back when I was being a little more competitive in Magic as well as Eternal, is that I'm right at that precipice, like that blade running where I don't lose early, where I have the rest of my day, but I don't lock in the win either. So I have to play like all my rounds. For example, spoiler alert, I literally needed to play all 28 games to get my 15 wins. And so, because that was the next thing I told myself, like once I had a losing record, I saw I was way out of contention for top 64. I was like, okay, I'll just get my 15 wins and call it a day. And I ended up having to play all my games. I was just like, yep, that is par for a course for me.
Oh boy. Yeah, it sounds a lot like me too.
Sweet, good. 2 peas in a pod, my friend.
That's
2 peas
right.
in a pod.
That's right.
I mean, it's funny because honestly, when I do really well in a tournament, I'm just as surprised as everybody else.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, I think one of the last competitive tournaments I did in Magic, I went 4-0, and they were like, yeah, you can go draw the next 2 rounds, you'll be in. I'm like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, totally. I'm like, are you serious? I don't have to play? They're like, no, you're good. You're locked in regardless. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So
it's a good feeling.
Yeah, no doubt. And luckily I wasn't playing an aggressive, like a mono red deck that tournament, so I didn't really care about player draw. The one of the tournaments before it, I felt kind of bad. A slight tangent. I actually felt kind of bad because I had to play not necessarily a friend of mine, but just someone I knew through the tournament scene. And they needed if they had a draw, they would have had a chance of making top 8, or they had to win. But I was playing mono red and they had a more dirtily build, so they knew it was a bad matchup. So they really wanted the draw and they asked me for it. But sadly, I told them, I was like, look, if I draw or lose, I'm still in, but I'm this 6th or 8th seed and I have to be on the draw the entire top 8. But if I win, I have the chance of being first, and so I'm on the play the rest of the day. And with mono red, obviously that's extremely important. So I was like, yeah, sorry, and I even debated with my friends about it, and they all said like it's tournament play, it's completely understandable. And so I did. I ended up beating him. I mean, part of it was because he tilted right off the bat. And so, but I beat him.
Just because you wouldn't draw?
Yeah, because I wouldn't draw.
Oh man, that's rough.
So he tilted, and it made it a little uncomfortable, I won't lie. But I told him, I was like, look, I don't make it to the top 8 of these regionals very often, and so I wanted to give myself the best chance. And sure enough, I did. I won that tournament. So I did tell him. I did tell him, I was like, to make it up for you, I will pay for your entry to the next tournament, because I see your side of it. And then they messaged me later, like, I only tilted because I was there. You're good. Now that I've cooled off, like I would have done the same thing if I was in your shoes. So it worked out.
Absolutely.
But there were some feel bads. I did contemplate about what was the correct thing and what not to do, but I consulted 3 of my friends, and they all told me the exact same thing. That friends are friends, but at the end of the day, we would all have done the same thing, even if we were playing against each other. So to do it to 100%. Like just a tournament acquaintance is what it is. So
yeah, it sucks to have to play against a friend and want to beat them, but you got to do what you got to do if you're trying to win a tournament.
Yeah, for sure. My roommate and I have knocked each other out of a top 8 plenty of times.
Oh, it's rough.
Yeah, the worst is when it's round 1 the top 8 pairing, and then we somehow like they're 4 and I'm 5 or something. It's like, oh great, one of us is knocking out the other one. Awesome,
right off the bat.
So yeah, all right, moving right on. Let's get back in. Let's see, round 16, go up against the Xenon mid-range. They played better. Yep. So they end up, I do remember this is one of those matchups where they navigated the board state at a higher level of efficiency than I did. And we were going into a top deck war at some point. We attritioned each other out. They got an office that I was not able to come back from, and they won. Round 17, I go up against a Rakano mid-range, but this version is weapon synergy, using things like Emerald Ring to pump up their units and stuff like that, which I thought was an interesting build. I don't remember how close the game was, but I do know I took it down. I feel like something was going on because they got to deploy their strategy, so it wasn't like I was steamrolling them, but I don't remember it being a difficult matchup either. But it was just a lot of weapon synergy and stuff like that. Round 18, go up against Huru Aggro, which is actually supposed to be, I think, a poor matchup against Xenon. I don't remember, actually. I thought it was actually favored when I was playing it. I felt like it was favored against Xenon, but then there was also sometimes where it's hard to tell. It's so hard to tell sometimes what's a good and bad matchup for you when people get the nut draw on you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you see the nut draw, you feel like you're never ever going to be able to beat that deck, but you play against an average draw and you probably have a pretty good chance. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing where you probably skew your opinion a little bit based on how you've seen that deck.
Mm-hmm. It was a race style game where we were both taking pop shots at each other, attacking, and at some point, yeah, we both stalled trading each other's raw resources. Then a Vara Sanctum off of, oh yeah, that was super neat. So I ended up taking a Vara Sanctum off of an Incarnus super early and trying to find the window to play it, because I was like, okay, we're racing, so I want to have, but we're racing, so we're not going to be trading units, we're just going to keep swinging each other. So, but it was the best choice at the time, and so it ended up leading up to, of course they were racing, so they had a trick, and it worked out to where at some point I managed to make some blocks so we wouldn't die, and we ended up with just our Incarnus on the board, and they were sealed to take it, and then we dropped the Vara Sanctum, giving the extra +3 attack to our Incarnus, taking it down. So that was a fun one. I wish I recorded that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was super fun one. Just navigating the game in that way, knowing I had Sanctum, and then obviously knowing they had something. So that was a ton of fun. The next one is Corendon Control again, and yep, we got a temple down. They were a control deck, so they couldn't pressure our temple. We got a World Joiner, and it just kind of did its thing and won the game. Round 20, go up against Argenport Control, which I personally do think is a bad matchup if they get their nut draw, because they're just drawing so many stupid cards off of Wanted Poster. Oh my god. It's so frustrating. Have you ever gone up against that curse deck when they do that? When they're like Wanted Poster, choice, Wanted Poster, choice, Wanted Poster, choice. You're just like, oh my god.
Yep. Every time I play against that deck, I feel like they have that combo. It's very frustrating to play against, for sure.
It really is. And then like you want to draw more than one unit because they're doing that, but then they're like malediction. It's so frustrating. Either way, let's see what happened. Back and forth a lot. We were running out of resources. They Vara'd into two. They Vara'd into 2 Carvets and we lost. Yep. That one's. And then round 21, our first Elysian matchup of the day, surprisingly enough. This is this is super cool. So shout out, hold on. Oh yeah, so I won this one by them kind of misplaying and me having another ace up my sleeve. I do remember this. I friended them and had them send me the deck. It was super cool. It was a Legion, but it was go wide. So they actually had all these token generators to just make a bunch of units and just stall out the board. And then I was wondering what was going on. I thought they were crushing them. And then all of a sudden they played Waystones, the Waystone fragments, pumping the whole team by +1/+1. And then they had attack formation to give them all killer. And so they were running like the Elysian Stranger that became a 4/4, that became a 5/5. It was super cool. I honestly was going to lose the game, but they had a killer that they felt that they wanted to hold on to. They were good. They were at like 12 or 13 life. They were totally comfortable, and we were going to die next turn. And they wiped our board with killer, but the last killer they had was a 3/3. And so they chose not to trade it with our Incarnus. Well, the weapon I got from Incarnus was the one that gives you a +1/+1 for every unit in your void, and they just wiped our board. So we untap, play that, and sure enough, kill them.
Oh man.
They had me, like straight up, they had me, and then they just chose. They're like, I don't want to lose my 3/3, and that was what cost them the game. So super fun one. Yeah, it was definitely. We had a close call like that today in draft, but sadly they had the answer. So. And for round 22, it was Stone Scar mid-range, and they conceded. Yeah, that was super weird. I don't know if they had to go or something, but I think after like turn 3, they just conceded. It was super weird. Game round 24, another Stone Scar mid-range. So I would say overall, probably Xenon Cultist and Stone Scar mid-range are probably public enemies number 1 and 2 in the current competitive scene for
Expedition.
Thank you. I don't know why Throne kept coming to mind. They got a turn 1 Akko that they managed to go off with a Persuader. I think we didn't have the most aggressive start, and they were on the play, so obviously dropping Akko and then hitting it, and then Persuader got it to trigger for the +4/+2 and overwhelm to the entire deck. We were able to stabilize for a little bit, but eventually we just lost to the overwhelming power because every card they drew off the top of their deck was just a bomb. So we lost that game. Round 24, Xenon mid-range mirror. Let's see, pumped lifesteal, they stole it. Oh yeah, so we play the turn 1, the lifesteal Inspire guy, the cultist. It's a 1-of in this build. We play it. We play it, we pump it, it dies, we reoccur it, we pump it, and then they steal it with a temple and then play it with their 3/1 Shadowland Walker or whatever. And yeah, they had the other side, the flip side to that is we had the Shadowland Walker as well ×3 with no 1-drops. Like that was our only 1-drop. So when they stole it, we just had 3 of them just sitting in our hand, not doing anything.
Oh no.
Yeah. So we lost that game. It was a little frustrating because I thought I was doing really well, and it just kind of it was huge too. Like I mean, it was literally, I think we got it up to, because it got pumped by something, I don't remember now. But anyways, it was like a 9/9 or something like that, and yeah, that game was frustrating. I had to take a minute after that.
Oh man, I feel for you.
Yeah, especially since if we had any of the Slumbering Stones or anything like that, we had 3 3/1s, the Shadowland Walker or whatever it is, the guide. So we would have been a ton of recursion and a ton of like board stalling, and it just didn't happen. Anywho, round 25, go up against the mirror again. We won in the attrition battle with us killing off their profits, which I think is one of the mirror breakers, is making sure your opponent doesn't get a profit. I said that earlier, and I'll reiterate, in the cultist mirror, one of the ways to break the mirror is to have a cultist or profit that can generate a ton of power. So I think answering each other's profits is 100% a legitimate strategy. 26 is, lo and behold, the Xenon mid-range. We mull the 6 with no shadow and 2 Incarnuses in hand. We just lose, so that was a non-game. 27, go up against Mono Shadow Elves, which was actually awesome. Saved a temple when that was another one. So I had a choice. The game was pretty close. We were losing on board, and I had a choice of potentially playing I don't remember what I played, but I had the choice of leaving up power for Immortalized to get Vara back from the void, or to play something to save the temple. And I decided, and I knew the Vara was the correct play, but for some ungodly reason, I decided that when it happened, that I was going to save the temple. And sure enough, it stopped me from being able to get Vara back. I think I just never got a window to get Vara back after that. And so we lost the temple anyways, and they just kind of overwhelmed us. And that was the turn where I felt like I really lost the game there. And then the last game was an Elysian mid-range, and we won that one. Like, I think they just never... We anticipated, we had the favor, whatever offering. I keep forgetting now. It's not Eager offering. The removal spell. Anyways, whatever.
I'm drawing a blank on it too.
Gosh darn it. I could say it a million times, but because we're recording, worthy
cause, right?
No. Oh yeah, worthy. Is it? It sounds right. We'll go with that.
I gotta look it up now.
Yeah, great. And then I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast right now is just yelling at us what it is. I'm pretty sure it's worthy cause.
It's worthy cause.
Okay. I don't know why it happens to me. I could say it 100 times, and then the one time we're recording, I draw a blank on it.
Yep.
So I just used that on their turn 4. So they got to bounce our unit. Oh no, that's right. So they play the weapon, the Sodi Spell Shaper. They try to equivocate our guy. I sack it, kill their guy instead, and that's just, the game is over there. So yeah, that was my ECQ run. Once again, reiterate, finished off 15 and 13, I guess is the record. Yeah, 15 and 13. So barely a winning record, not something I'm exactly happy with, but I also wasn't expecting to do super well in this tournament. So it would have been different if I felt a little more prepared, but I didn't. But that was my overall run. So I have a couple of key points I'll mention about the matchups to help people and stuff like that, but I feel like I talked a lot. So how did the tail end of your tournament finish off?
Yeah, kind of just more of the same. Kind of, a couple wins here, a couple losses there, just kind of up and down. No real big streaks either way. Definitely played against a lot of Xenon. I don't know. It sounded like you had about 10 mirrors, something like that. I don't know if you know the exact number, but I know.
I'll count while you talk.
Yeah, I had somewhere around 10 or 11 matchups against Xenon, and I lost probably 7 or 8 of them. It was definitely pretty rough. I think I had a lot of situations where I could have pulled it out, and they just stabilized at the right time. They had the worthy cause at the right time. 2 of the games they hit triple Carvet, and what do you do against that? So there were a lot of games where I felt like I was winning, or I felt like I was in a good spot to have a chance to win, and then it just felt like it slipped away at the wrong time. But yeah, a lot of Xenon, and a couple Huru matchups that I think I won one and lost one. I think I only saw Elysian once, and I was pretty surprised. I mean, it's definitely not as popular as it was when the format first came out, but I feel like it's still a really strong deck, so I was surprised to not see more of it. But I think just Xenon kind of has taken over as the Time X deck of choice. So that was kind of my run. Unfortunately, 13 and 15, and just kind of a lot of up and down, which was pretty unfortunate, but it happens.
You did mention 2 things that I do want to point out. Like, part of the first thing, I think the issue with Elysian is that the games are so redundant. I feel like it's the same thing every way. You want the Border Scout on turn 1, you want the Trailmaker on turn 2, so then turn 3 you could play the Sodi Spell Shaper, or what's the other, and then turn 4 play the Griffin. Like, the games are so repetitive that I think people get tired of playing it. Versus the one thing I learned with the Xenon deck is that there's so many different keepable hands that the game doesn't actually play out the same every time. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, I follow you.
It was surprising to me how many times I looked and I'm like, yeah, this hand is keepable, and it wasn't one of those things where I had to mull until I saw a Prophet and a Nahid's Choice on. It wasn't one of those things where, and so at least in my experience, it did play out quite differently. Another thing that you mentioned that is worth mentioning, or at least drawing attention to, is like you said, they played triple carvet. What can you do? And that's totally right. It goes back to one of those things where sometimes people just get these nut draws that I think you have to be accurate in your assessment of both your gameplay as well as your record of a deck, and understand that those are still count towards non-games, in my opinion. For example, if you're playing an aggro deck and your opponent has triple torch, okay, like that is triple torch. That is not a normal game state, and of course you're going to lose that game. They have the most efficient answer to your best draw. Of course, you can't expect to win that game. That doesn't mean that that deck is going to crush you, because if that's the case, then just any deck that runs 4 torches is going to crush you. So it's important to identify that. Now, if it is one of those things where every time someone drops a carvet on you, you lose the game, now that's something to make a note. That's a data point you can take and go back in your deck building and your strategy to figure it out. And I do think it's very important. I think any deck that is able to run an edict that can kill Shadow has to anticipate grabbing it anytime your opponent's on 5 power, because there's a chance that on turn 6 they're going to drop a carvet and you're going to want to get it off the board as soon as possible. And I got to tell you, that did win me a handful of games where I anticipated my opponent having carvet, had the edict, and immediately answered it, and it just makes the cultist just be kind of a joke by that point. And sometimes I was even able to make them sack the cultist somehow, either by chump blocking or attacking or eating something to go, or they were afraid of a removal spell, so they're like, sure, I'll eat the cultist and make my carvet bigger, awesome, and then edict it, and now you just got a clean 1-for-1, but except you paid 2 where they paid 6.
Yeah, absolutely. Having answers to carvet is 100% something you need in this format.
I really do. I can't think of, honestly, any other unit that I think poses as much problems and threat as Carvet does.
I think maybe Incarnus is close to up there, but yeah, I think Carvet's certainly the number one.
The thing about Incarnus, though, is that A, it's Shadow. So already if you're worried about Carvet, you're going to have an answer to Incarnus. But 2,
True.
Thanks to Verret, everyone has an X3 in mind. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Thanks to the popularity of Verret being such a hoser to decks early on, where that's another card that's on everybody's radar. And I've seen it, because even when I finally jumped on it and tried the Stone Scar aggro deck, I realized that, this turn 2 Verret with some way to pump it, as scary as it is and as great as it feels to have it done, a lot of decks have an answer to it.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right.
So I think that's kind of mitigated Incarnus a little bit. Don't get me wrong, Incarnus is still very powerful. I'm not saying it's not a powerful card, but there's a handful more answers to Varret, and it's on everyone. Incarnus, it's on everyone's radar than Carvet.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to kill Incarnus, but I think the Invoke that's something that I've not been a super big fan of. Just I don't really love RNG mechanics. The last real RNG mechanic we had was Revenge, and that one didn't really go over super well. And I think this one being so similar to I can't remember what the mechanic's called, but there's a mechanic that's very, very similar in Hearthstone. That this one's a little more directed, because there's like 1 unit, 1 spell, and 1 attachment, I think. But it's I don't love that RNG aspect. I get that you get to select 1 of 3, but for both sides it kind of feels, I don't know, it's like super swingy, right? It's like if you're the one playing it, you could hit a dud and then it feels horrible, or you hit some insane legend like another Carvet, or the exact removal spell you needed to kill the thing that was in the way, and
the stupid crown, the steal your unit and give it lifesteal. Oh my god.
Or the thing that steals, if it has 4 attack or less, is perfect answer for Carvet. Like it's able to give you things that answer so much, and or just insanely powerful, units or whatever. And uh, obviously, there are those times when it doesn't hit, but it hits a lot. And I've seen, I can't even tell you how many games where the game was won just by Incarnus, just because of the invoke. So that's one of the cards that I'm not super stoked about being a thing, or just I guess the mechanic in general. But it's definitely very powerful, and when it's in the format, people are going to use it.
Yeah, I agree. What's your take on cargos / contrabands then? Because they're kind of similar.
Yeah, they are similar, right? Like, it's one of each of the factions.
Yes, yeah, it's completely random, but now instead of getting one faction, 3 different types, you get one of each, any random card from the faction. I feel like it plays out just a little bit different because they're not guaranteed, and it's kind of an upgrade. Initially it's just fixing your power, and then when fixing your power isn't important, you get a random card. But what's your take on it?
Well, no, yeah, I completely agree there. And also, I think it's less powerful because it's not on a 3/3 unblockable body that can potentially do the same thing again after 3 turns.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
it's a little bit different in that way, but I still don't love that RNG aspect of that card either. But I think you're right. It's not quite as tough as the listeners.
Someone mentioned it at some point. I don't know if I heard it from like Hearthstone or from Magic or from Eternal. I don't think it was Eternal. I think I heard about this way before, but stuff like that, kind of what it does, I feel that they're designed for the storytelling aspect, because that's exactly what it does. It's one of those things. Yeah, I was totally losing this game, and then I top decked Incarnus, and then boom, there goes your story. I drew this, and this happened, and blah blah blah. So I think it gives that entertainment aspect of the game is raised by that. Some people like that randomness, some people don't. It does change up the gameplay. I do think one of the Direwolf employees did say that it does give you the ability to play cards that you normally wouldn't see, and get to use those in game. For example, the crown. The crown. Yeah, we just talked. Both of us groaned immensely when we talked about that crown that steals a unit, gives it lifesteal. But as far as I've been playing, I've never seen anyone play that in any of it constructed deck.
I have played that in one constructed deck, but I think you could probably guess as to how good that deck was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So there is some merit to that, and I could see where they're going with it. I'm with you. For me personally, I like to err on the side of consistency. I do that both in drafting and in constructed. I do see the value of randomness, and it does kind of give you a little bit of flexibility in your deck, where now putting Incarnus in there has the potential of giving you a card for every situation, at a price, but there is the potential of like, yes, that's the card I was looking for, or nope, nothing here helps me. Okay. So, but
I just, my main issue is that, most card games, if not all card games, inherently have that RNG aspect, and especially in Eternal, with the resource system being, interleaved in the deck, kind of like in Magic, that aspect is already a bit of RNG, and obviously what you draw is RNG. So we're already, dealing with RNG just by the nature of what it is, right? Like, that adding more RNG on top of that doesn't really sit too well with me, but I certainly understand, it does have some entertainment value. And also, I mean, like you said, it could be that card that swings the game. And I think it's just that it feels so bad to be on the receiving end, which there's plenty of situations like that in every card game where being on the receiving end feels horrible. And maybe that's not the right justification, but I don't know. I just feel like there's enough swinginess to it that it just doesn't feel good to me.
Well, yeah, you sit there and you navigate the game the best you can, and you feel like you're deserving of winning, and then all of a sudden a 1 in 85 chance of a card coming up that wasn't even in their deck ends up losing you the game. So I can get behind that. I can totally understand that. Where it's like, yeah, well played, friend. Good skill.
Right, exactly.
All right, sweet. Do you have any takeaways overall for the expedition format? I personally am enjoying it. I think it's a nice change, so you're not able to deal with the same meta from Throne. I do one couple big takeaways for me is the cultist deck. Sometimes you're the attrition deck, sometimes you're the aggro deck. I do think you have to value profit. I think profit goes a long way towards making you overwhelm your opponent. And I'm very high on having any edicts that you can run in your market because I think they are very clean cut answers and very efficient answers to certain matchups. So I think if your example Stone Scar, having the fire and shadow edicts in your market is 100% correct.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. I think pretty much every deck that I'm running that's just two factions has both the edicts in the market. It seems almost wrong to not do that. They're so clean for a lot of different decks, and having the two of them in the market lets you cover more in terms of the factions that you can kill. But yeah, I mean, I've been really enjoying Expedition as well. I've been playing a fair amount of different decks, and yeah, it's nice to have a new format, new way to get rewards at the end of the month, and one that's going to potentially be rotating more often and give us some fresh new stuff to do. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Sweet. One other thing I want to close on the expedition format is that through all my testing of Oni, Ronin, or Rakano Oni, if you guys are into that deck, I actually started off early experimenting with a mono red version using the Quartermaster and Jishu combo to draw a bunch of cards, and moved away from it because it was just too hard to enable. Turns out that Pleasing Sky 4, I believe, took a Rakano version of the deck using Quartermaster and Jishu to a top 64 finish. So maybe even a top 32, I believe. So if you are experimenting, and they were kind enough to post their deck, and I've been playing that, and I actually like it a lot. I think it has a lot of fun, a lot of longevity to it, and does have an aggressive side. So definitely check that out. If you are playing around with Rakano Onis, I would highly suggest running the Jishu Quartermaster combo. I know you don't always get it, but it surprisingly sticks quite a bit because people try to remove your early threat. And then the bargain card in the market that lets you play essentially a somewhat free Aegis is really good. I use it all the time. I almost throw off my curve to play it for free on a unit that I don't want to get maledictioned, and it really forces your opponent to play off the beaten path because they don't expect it. Or you get to play on turn 3. Turn 3 you swing in for 2 Oni, you pay 1, and then you play another 2 drop, and now all of a sudden they have an Aegis unit on the board that they weren't anticipating. So just a couple of small takeaways off the beaten path there for me. Anything else on testing before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Sweet. All right, so would you play Stone Scar Dragons again?
Yeah, I think I would. I haven't had as much experience with that version as with the aggressive version, but I think that Carwit's just so good that it's definitely worth playing the higher curve to have that in there, and Eclipse Dragon as well. So yeah, I definitely would.
Yeah, I like Eclipse Dragon quite a bit.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
I like the fact that it also somewhat synergizes with Dragon Forge because it can go get it, as well as the 3 power that you get reset at your opponent's turn is enough to cast Fire Forge, so Dragon Forge.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Sweet. Well, Matty, that is going to do it for us. We're not going to have a constructed corner because the entire podcast is a constructed corner. So I wanted to thank you so much, truly, for coming on the show, and really appreciate it. I didn't realize that we've been streaming just about the same amount of time. I always thought you were more senior than me. Not to say that you're not. You still are, by all means. But I just thought it was funny. For some reason, I guess I'm always under the assumption that one's been streaming and playing Eternal longer than me, or since closed beta. So.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I feel like everybody's been around longer than I have too, but yeah, I've only been playing since the tail end of set 1, so not since closed beta.
Okay, well, you still got me beat then. I started at Fall of Origin Port, so.
Okay, nice.
All right, sweet. But once again, thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Twitch TV/Mattyocre, and I don't have enough subs on YouTube to have my own subscription or my own URL yet, but you can just search for me on YouTube at Mattyocre as well.
Awesome. What's your streaming schedule right now?
So I've been on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but be getting back to it after the holiday, and I'll be doing Thursdays for sure, and then I'm probably sometimes on Tuesdays as well. Cutting back a little bit on the streaming, going to try to do a little more on the YouTube side, but yeah, going to be doing at least once or twice a week going forward. So
awesome. Yeah, definitely check it out, guys. Great streamer. I enjoy his content. Fantastic. Interacts a lot with the chat as well as talking through plays and stuff. I very enjoy it. He's a fantastic aggro player. That aggressive Stone Scar deck that he took to the Tuesday night Eternal tournament was absolutely fun to watch. You piloted it so well. Like, man, I totally wanted to pick up an aggressive deck after that for sure.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you having me come to hang out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hopefully we can have you back on the show again. Maybe even talk some limited.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, that's going to do it. We're going to call it a show here. You can catch me once again at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Every Sunday, we are doing cube drafts completely free. And then for the most part, drafting and sealed on Tuesday and Monday and Tuesday nights. You can catch this podcast as well as other videos on YouTube. Just look up Eternal Journey or EJthePodcast. And of course, you can catch this podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, I believe Google Podcast, and then of course YouTube. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Matty, yet again, thank you so much. And that'll do it, guys. Until next time, happy gaming.